Imagine a man sworn to protect you from fire, secretly being the one who lights the match. A man who rushes into burning buildings by day, only to spark them himself at night. A man celebrated as one of America's top arson investigators, while quietly fueling chaos, destruction, and death. This is the story of John Orr, the fire captain who investigated the very crimes he committed, and almost got away with turning entire towns into ashes. When residents of Glendale, California went to sleep each night in the 1980s, they believed their fire department was one of the best in the state. And in many ways, that was true, especially because of one man, Captain John Leonard Orr. He was sharp, confident, and widely known for having a kind of uncanny instinct for identifying the cause of a fire. If a building burned, John was the guy you wanted combing through the ashes. But what no one knew was that John didn't just understand fire, he craved it. And long before the world caught on, John was already living a double life, one that would span nearly a decade, destroy countless homes and businesses, and take innocent lives in the process. Our story begins around 1984. John was 35, married, and living a seemingly normal suburban life in Glendale. He held a respected position as a fire investigator, the kind of job that involves examining burn patterns, debris, structural damage, heat signatures, and chemical residues. He was good at it, scarily good, but beneath that calm exterior was a dangerous obsession. John didn't merely study fire, he fantasized about it. He thought about it constantly. He analyzed how flames danced, how heat traveled, and how long it would take for a small spark to swallow an entire structure. And eventually, studying fire wasn't enough. John wanted to create it. Like many serial offenders, his first steps were small trash fires, brush fires, small blazes that could be brushed off as accidents. But just like any addiction, small didn't satisfy him for long. Then came October 1984. The moment everything changed. John crafted what would later become known as his signature device, a simple but deadly combination of a cigarette, matches, rubber bands, and a highly flammable glue. It was cheap, portable, and incredibly effective. He could place it anywhere, walk away, and know that within minutes, fire would break out with no one suspecting him. On one afternoon, John drove to a home improvement store in South Pasadena. He walked casually down the aisles, appearing as harmless as any other customer. Then he slipped his device beneath a foam cushion and quietly walked out. Fire didn't erupt right away. That was part of the device's design, a delayed ignition that allowed him to leave the scene unnoticed. Minutes later, flames took hold. Then they spread, and then they exploded. The store went up faster than anyone could react. For innocent people died. When investigators ruled the official cause as an electrical accident, John didn't stay quiet. He argued, he pushed back. He insisted it was arson, not because he cared about the truth, but because he wanted recognition. He wanted people to admire his genius without realizing they were praising the killer standing right beside them. Over the next several years, fires kept popping up across Southern California. Stores, warehouses, and small businesses erupted in flames, some while people were still inside. Every time, John seemed to be coincidentally nearby, ready to respond to the scene. He would sift through the rubble with remarkable expertise, often identifying the cause within minutes. Other investigators admired him. Supervisors praised him. Journalists interviewed him on television. People called him one of the best arson minds in the country. They had no idea they were celebrating a serial arsonist in plain sight. John wrote articles boasting about catching more than 40 He taught workshops, gave lectures, and built a reputation as a man who understood arsonists better than anyone. Of course, he did. He was one. In 1987, John attended an arson investigators conference in Fresno, surrounded by hundreds of detectives and fire experts. But instead of focusing on the seminars, John had a burning urge, literally. While everyone else sat in lectures, John slipped away, walked into a pharmacy, and placed another incendiary device inside a stack of sleeping bags. Minutes later, the store was engulfed in flames. That alone would have been shocking, but John wasn't finished. Within hours, he set fire to a nearby fabric store, then another pharmacy, then another fabric store, then a craft shop in a different town. 5 major fires, one day, all lit by a firefighter attending an arson conference. But this time, he made a mistake. At one scene, investigators found a tiny clue, a piece of yellow paper partially wrapped around the device. It wasn't much, but it was enough to raise suspicion. Marvin noticed a chilling coincidence. Every fire occurred during the conference. What if the arsonist was one of them? It was a bold theory, and no one wanted to believe a fellow investigator could do such a thing. The case eventually went cold. But Marvin didn't forget. 2 years later, at another arson conference in Pacific Grove, the same pattern emerged. Buildings in the area began burning. The ignition devices looked identical. The yellow paper was back anti-Stein. Investigators found a partial fingerprint. Marvin immediately recognized the connection. 2 conferences, same type of fires, same method. It couldn't be a coincidence. He requested a list of attendees from both conferences. Only 10 people had attended both. One of them was John Orr. Marvin ordered fingerprint comparisons, but the technology in 1989 wasn't advanced enough to confirm a match. John slipped through the cracks again. By the early 1990s, John had been setting fires for nearly 7 years, and the longer he went uncaught, the more invincible he felt. Then he did something incredibly stupid. He started writing a novel. The manuscript was titled Points of Origin, and it wasn't just fiction. It was a confession disguised as a story. The main character, a firefighter who sets fires but investigates them afterward. The plot? Almost identical to the real fires John had started. He even described a deadly fire in a hardware store where 4 people died, just like the South Pasadena incident. The character in the book was even turned on by fire. Was John revealing his own fantasies? No one knew for sure, but the parallels were undeniable. Meanwhile, he kept lighting real fires. A store in North Hollywood, a Glendale blaze that destroyed over 60 homes, a fire on the Warner Brothers backlot that ruined an entire set, some estimates say. John sets several hundred fires. Others say over 2,000. Whatever the exact number, one thing is certain: John Orr caused more damage than almost any arsonist in American history. By 1991, California officials had enough. Fires were happening too often, too similarly, and too predictably. A special task force was created to find the serial arsonist, and one of the first things they did was revisit the partial fingerprint found years earlier. But this time they used a newer, more sophisticated system. And instantly, they got a match. John Leonard Orr. Investigators were stunned. John was one of the most respected arson minds in the country. He was the guy they trusted to solve these crimes. At first, they assumed he must have contaminated the evidence by accident. Surely wasn't he the arsonist? But the more they dug, the stranger it got. They tracked his movements. They monitored his car with a hidden device. They interviewed his supervisors, and that's when one supervisor casually mentioned John's manuscript. Investigators got a search warrant, entered John's home, and found the full draft of Points of Origin. When they read it, everything clicked. It wasn't just a crime novel, it was practically an autobiography, with fingerprints, surveillance, interviews, and the manuscript tying everything together. The task force had enough. Officers confronted John Orr. He didn't flee. He didn't fight. He simply sat there, maybe realizing that the fires he loved so much had finally consumed him. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of arson and murder. As investigators kept digging, more and more fires were linked to him. Each one showed his signature style. The same homemade device, the same delayed ignition, the same behavior patterns. John Orr, the man praised as a hero, was one of the most prolific arsonists the country had ever seen. John Orr stands as a terrifying reminder that evil doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes it wears a badge. Sometimes it carries a fire hose. And sometimes it stands in the spotlight, applauded for solving the very crimes it commits. He was a firefighter who loved the flames more than the people he was supposed to protect. A man who turned his obsession into a deadly game. And a man who nearly burned his way into history without ever being caught. But in the end, it wasn't a witness, or a confession, or a security camera that brought him down. It was a fingerprint, a piece of yellow paper, and his own twisted desire to write a book about himself.